Hello everybody, it's MrScaryMuffin here, and we're doing another Thoughts Talk and TF2. Now before I start, I want to give a big shout out to Jevin for making the thumbnail for this episode. It's a little bit whimsical. If you guys want to make some thumbnails for me, I've been using the one that DJ Spraycrate made for me several times over and over again, but I think it's time for it to get some different stuff, get some new things going on. So if you guys want to make some thumbnails, I will use pretty much anything, as I said, as you can tell right here. Anyways, the topic this time around is going to be a retroactive look at the year 2014. I know we are 4 months into 2015 already, but hey, I just started the series again a couple weeks ago, so give me a break here. We're going to talk about 2014, looking back at it. Now, for me, 2014 was a great year. I got a new job, I got a pretty good position, nice security, you know, with the regular full-time contract and stuff like that. I feel really great about that. I've been doing pretty well in Pokemon as well, doing fairly well. Right now I am currently ranked number 9 in BC and number 13, I think, in Canada. But I was sitting down, I think it was back in January, I was sitting down at my barber's place, and I was reading a magazine. It was a Time magazine, and it was a Time magazine for January, and it had basically the top news stories of 2014. And right off the bat, I was looking at things like Ferguson, the Isla Vista killings, the Gamergate, anti-vaxxers, Russian invasion in Ukraine, the Russian discrimination against gays for Sochi 2014, all these kinds of things. And I realized, like, wow, 2014 sucked as a year. It was probably the worst year. And like on top of those things, on top of like Gamergate and all that stuff, there's also Greenpeace stomping on the hummingbird lines, the rape charges to Bill Cosby and Gian Gomeshi. There's the police targeting, like the police targeted shootings in Moncton, the Ottawa shootings, the NFL domestic violence reports as well, the rise of the ISIS, hackers leaking photos of women celebrities around, the Sony leaks even. And it was crazy to me looking back at this, all these kinds of things, and they were all in 2014. It was probably, in recent history, and it comes to mind, probably the worst year that I have ever seen in terms of how much hate there was, how much discrimination there was. Fungan called it the year of toxicity, and I have to agree. And it wasn't just negative press, it wasn't just shock journalism kind of stuff, because I don't really watch or follow the news at all, right? Like I used to like doing crosswords and stuff like that, but I didn't even really look at the news stories that much. And yet you heard about all these headlines. It has a little bit to do with social media, has a little bit to do with the fact that these are viral stories, because especially since they are surrounded by this discrimination. But it really, like, the year itself just was terrible. It seemed like there was a lot of tension that accumulated in all these things that happened, all these stuff to do with hate crimes and discrimination. It was just terrible to think about, and one can only hope that 2015 does not repeat this. And it would be very, very important to look at the year 2015 and like just to see whether it is a good year or not in terms of all this kind of stuff. So far, we've been steering fairly clear. I mean, right around this time last year, we already had the whole things with Sochi and, you know, all that kind of stuff anyways. So we're doing fine so far. Right around this time last year was the Sony leaks that came out around May, and how much how bad that was for Sony and all that kind of stuff. You could see a lot of things that they were talking about as well. And you know, part of this, I have to agree, like, part of this is because there's more reporting. Like, for example, the general consensus is kind of skewed. Like, oh yeah, there's a lot of teen pregnancy going around. Oh yeah, there's a lot of homicides and stuff like that. But, I mean, if you look at the statistics shows that, you know, teen pregnancy is at an all-time low. Homicides, crime rates in general is at an all-time low. But we still remember these things being reported, and it is important that they get reported, and to get reported correctly. I think what is more important than that is our discussions around it and how we talk about it and why we talk about it. Looking at Ferguson, for example, that's the way where everybody was kind of talking about it wrong. I mean, I'm not gonna say there's a right and wrong side, but like people were justifiably angry and they had their peaceful rallies. They had the stuff that, you know, things just turned ugly kind of stuff. But I really think that people need to be discussing these things much better, because these things are now coming to a head. Like I was saying, previous years, all these tensions, all this hatred, hate crimes and kind of stuff like that, it's starting to blow up like a powder keg, where everything is just happening. And 2014 just happened to be the year where all these things just went crazy nutso. And what's important is how we talk about it. So things like Gamergate. Gamergate is still probably the thing that is being talked about in the worst possible way, because people just can't seem to find a place where they can talk with each other. It seems a lot of people are under this opinion where if you compromise, if you give sway to a certain perspective or a certain comment, you suddenly lost the argument. And it's not a very healthy way to engage in dialogue, and it's a very saddening thing. And it's really important for people to step back and learn to talk to each other in a way that isn't gonna try to make the problem worse, basically, because that's what's happening with things like Gamergate. It's just like the issue is still coming up, and it's just getting worse because people aren't able to talk about it properly. Another thing, like, I mean, okay, like myself, I'm looking at stuff and I realize, like, you know, everybody has valid points. Everybody has valid points for every side. Otherwise, people really won't follow that argument that long. You know, you're not going to get a huge momentum. You're not going to have a huge following if you're fundamentally flawed. And I talked about this in the past about things like nature versus nurture, where if you have both sides clashing, you know, there's obviously something to be said for each side, and maybe the final solution that you are looking for, the final thing that you're looking for, is not one or the other, but somewhere in the middle, something that has a bit of this and a bit of that. I don't know. It's something to think about. I'll give you guys an example. For like looking at Obama, for example, I think anybody who is outside of America can unanimously say that Obama was good for America. You know, he introduced healthcare, which is so obvious elsewhere. He made the GDP better. The unemployment rates are way down. Like, if you look at how well America was doing from the time when Obama took the office and right now, you can see the improvements that has happened in the country. But at the same time, if you were to take a peek at a conservative media site or a media paper, you can see some valid arguments against, against Obama. Things that his administration has done, has messed up and tried to cover up. Things, for example, I think they did this prisoner exchange where and in order to get back some American soldiers who went AWOL, and then they try to kind of like brush it underneath the carpet by like, oh, you know, give them an honorable discharge and kind of stuff like that, but the military refused to do it. Then they stuck it to Obama, kind of stuff. Obviously, the way the media frames it too is not the best way, I have to admit. Like, it frames it in a very confrontational, very like, here's what you can say to your friends to stick it to them so that they can know how dumb they are being. You know, the media itself is programming people to talk about the news in this kind of way, so that when they're talking about friends and they get riled up, they're like, oh man, how can people be so dumb, blah blah blah, and then they all feel a connection to each other because they're bashing another group, which is the people who don't believe in the same thing that you do. And that's not the way you should talk about the news. In the end, that is not the way you guys should be talking about the news. If you're talking with somebody, talk about the news. Don't talk about the people who believe on the other side. If you guys are talking to somebody who is on the other side of the issue, talk to them like a normal human being. It's hard to do because these past few years, especially with Fox News and the way they frame their arguments and stuff like that, it's hard to do because everybody is so confrontational. Nobody wants to give up any ground because they are afraid they're going to lose, quote unquote, the battle, lose the argument. There's no such thing as losing the argument. We only lose the argument when people are dying because of these hate crimes. That is when we are all losing these kinds of things. So when you guys are talking about stories, when you guys are talking about opinions with your friends, I encourage you, please, try to talk like normal people. Try to engage in an actual dialogue. It's gonna be hard. I have to admit it, like, I can only encourage you guys to keep trying, right? And try not to make things worse. I think that's the most important stuff. So yeah, anyways, that is the year in review for me. How was your guys' year? Let me know how that goes. Leave a comment in the comment section below as well. Let me know what other topics you want to hear me talk about in future episodes. That'd be kind of cool. And hey, if you guys want to make a thumbnail for a future Thoughts Talk in TF2, do that one for me as well. Tweet at me or what have you, and I will, like I said before, I'm willing to use almost anything. As long as something relevant to the actual series, then I will probably use it no matter how good or bad it is. Fire up your Photoshop, throw some TF2 stuff, get some TF2 fonts in there, throw random things, just crop random clip art together, I don't care, whatever you want to do. Anyways guys, thank you so much for listening. Let me know what you guys think about the topic that we talked about today. And yeah, hopefully 2015 will be a much better year. Bye.